Hello and welcome to The Other Marthas, the show where a drama student and a film graduate try to make sense of things we wish we were qualified in instead, with an emphasis on history, mystery, and all things morbid. A quick disclaimer before we get started, we don't claim to be experts in any of the fields we'll be discussing, so while everything we say is based on individual research, it's all a bit of fun and we suggest that you take everything we say with a pinch of salt. I'm Martha, I'm the drama student.
And I'm the other Martha, the film graduate. So Martha, what are we talking about today?
Well, Martha, today I'm very excited to tell you we will be talking about Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt.
Amazing! I wanted in Egypt.
Fantastic. Well, I, for some reason, had kind of completely forgotten that places outside Europe existed, which perhaps is a reflection of our education system.
Classic.
But what happened was I was flicking through this book that I was given for Christmas by Rob. Thank you very much, Rob, if you're listening. It's called Interesting Stories for Curious People. And basically, it's tiny little micro chapters on small anecdotes, famous people, things like that, that you can then go and research further, I guess, if it piques your interest. And I was flicking through it for podcast ideas. And I came across a chapter called Was It Really an Asp? And I thought, oh, Cleopatra, great idea. I read the chapter. It's 3 pages long. And basically, the conclusion it comes to is, yeah, probably. And
I don't understand the name of the title. I mean, the name of the chapter.
Okay, so
you've got your work cut out.
Fantastic. Was it really an asp is a reference to the kind of famous way in which Cleopatra is said to have committed suicide, which is using an asp, which is a symbol of divine royalty, allowing it to bite her in a kind of final act of defiance. And basically what the chapter said was, did that happen? Well, this guy said it did. This other guy said it probably did. So I guess, which partly brings me on to kind of the main point of this episode, because I'm talking about Cleopatra's life, but the angle I'm going for is kind of critiquing the narrative that we in the West are generally taught about Cleopatra and where that comes from. I'll go into that. I'll actually look at my notes now because I'm trying to summarize it and I've not even started talking about it. So what I've put in my notes first is before we get into the actual story of Cleopatra, I want to address where the majority of our ideas of Cleopatra come from and why I want to talk to her about her, not talk to her. This is the seance episode.
Oh, seance! Should we do a seance? I've got tarot cards.
If you would like us to do a seance
seances
in the next episode, pop over to our YouTube channel and comment that you'd like to see a seance, because we like seeing people over there. So this chapter got me thinking, what do I actually know about Cleopatra going into this?
You should ask me as well what I know about Cleopatra.
That's a good idea, actually. Okay,
we can compare.
Yeah, so going into this, Martha, what do you know about Cleopatra? What's your understanding of her?
Oh, thank you so much for asking.
That's all right. I like to involve you.
Thanks so much for asping. I know, first of all, an asp was involved because you just told me.
Yeah, did you know that beforehand?
I might have heard something about it, but I'd forgotten until you said it. That fella from Rome was involved with
Mark
her,
Antony?
Potentially. Now, no, I thought Julius Caesar, but obviously I'm wrong.
No, you're not. Okay.
She wore a fake beard.
I think that was Hatshepsut.
Oh, I thought she wore one too.
Maybe she did. I don't know.
And that's about it.
Okay, that's fair. So you may have heard vaguely about her death. You know about a romantic liaison and something she used to do with her face, basically.
Obviously, I knew that at least I might say obviously I knew and then I'm wrong, but I believed her to be a pharaoh of some description.
Yeah, interestingly, in my research, they never referred to her as a pharaoh, so I don't know if in that dynasty, Ptolemaic dynasty, they were referred to as pharaohs or just rulers, queens, kings. But she was indeed an Egyptian ruler. Right. I'm going to
look up if she had a beard.
Okay. I've written down in advance what I knew about her, which was, and what I've written is Egyptian queen, Mark Antony, brackets Julius Caesar, incestuous family, beautiful, and death. And what I started to question was why I know or am aware of more about Cleopatra's sort of supposed beauty routine than I do about her politics.
The milk.
Right, yeah. Like, I was going to say, if you search Cleopatra on Google, I think if you search Cleopatra on Google, thankfully, most of what comes up is history. But the sort of most common mentions of Cleopatra in everyday life, like, did you know she used to bathe in milk? Did you know Cleopatra wore eyeliner like this? Oh, aloe vera, so Cleopatra. So I was wondering why I knew more about that and also her love affairs than I did about her politics, bearing in mind some sort of bare facts about her being she was the last of the Ptolemaic rulers, which was a huge dynasty. It was from about 305 BC to about 30 BC. She spent 20 plus years negotiating with Rome to avoid a war. She managed to convince 2 separate Roman warlords at 2 different times to bend their armies, their full might, basically, to her cause, despite the fact that in both instances she was at a disadvantage politically, and then ended up losing it all in a war where she was siding with the Roman Republic against Rome itself. Really interesting. I don't really know anything about it. Well, I do now, but I didn't. So, during my research, I kept getting frustrated because the emphasis on how sexy she was just getting tiring. There was a documentary that I don't know exactly when it was from, but it was on a mainstream channel, and it must have come out post 2009 because I know that the findings that they were talking about in that documentary happened in 2009, so quite recent. They kept going on and on and on about what she looked like, and also on how ruthless she was. The title of the documentary was Cleopatra one of history's biggest killers? Which is a weird statement anyway, like how do you define a big killer?
One who's killed a lot, I guess.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, every ruler, particularly ancient rulers, where it's more about, gaining territories and conquering and things like that than it is nowadays when it's more about diplomacy, I guess. Every ruler has killed a lot. And Cleopatra, most of her political life was defined by trying to achieve peace. And basically what the documentary was getting at was the fact that she may or may not have had her sister Arsinoe put to death. There's no evidence that she did. A Roman writer 100 plus years after her death wrote that she did. We don't know what that's based off. She probably did, to be honest.
Slander.
But the thing is, and the same with her 2 husband brothers, she probably had them put to death. However, that is pure speculation. And moreover, it was incredibly normal for the period and the location. And I don't see a lot of male rulers being criticised in that way. Specifically, a lot of the rhetoric around Cleo doing away with her family, allegedly, is, I feel like a commentary channel now, allegedly.
Gotta say allegedly or you get sued.
I know. Cleopatra Foundation might come for me.
Well, no, but I see your point. Like, Mary Tudor is called Bloody Mary because she had a war against the Protestants.
Right.
Except, who also had religious issues with other people? Was it every other king in England?
Exactly.
Yes, it was.
And that whole...
But you don't get them called Bloody Simon.
Bloody Simon. Yeah, no, exactly. And I think specifically with the familial slant, and we get this a lot with Elizabeth I and Mary Tudor as well, and their relationship, I think it emphasises the family angle. And I think there's some insidious misogyny going on there that's like, oh, they're betraying the traits of the fairer sex who are so caring and family oriented, and her own sister. It's like, it's a political rival.
Yeah, it's also weird when, as you were saying, everyone's like, oh, she was so beautiful and so attractive. And it's like, okay, but she's been dead for ages, so can we get over that? Or
yeah, exactly.
She's rotted now. But I agree, like, no one's like, ooh, Tutankhamun, what a looker. No one's like obsessed. I mean, it's weird because he's a boy, but
yeah, it's true, actually.
No one is obsessing. Oh, Julius Caesar, what a hottie.
Yeah, and a lot of these people
follow Julius Caesar's beauty routines.
Yes,
get
exactly.
All the gals
it's like
you want.
His workout routine. Oh, Alexander the Great shaved in such an interesting way. It's really interesting. Like, the deeper I got into this, the more I was like, I started off going, this is a bit misogynistic. And then I got into some of the beauty stuff and went, this is a bit racist. And then I got into more of the beauty stuff and went, this is very capitalist oriented. Like, there are just a lot of layers of problems with it. And it's like, can we just examine her really interesting rule, please? Which, ironically, I'm not doing now, but I'm critiquing it. So,
do you know, though, it's also true of Elizabeth. What people know about her is she wore lead makeup.
That's so true. And she had a wig.
She wore wigs. And it's okay. She also defeated the Spanish Armada. To be fair, a lot of that was the wind, but, she did things, bad things and good things.
But that's a point as well.
Think about that.
And at that time, didn't everyone paint their face white and wear wigs anyway?
A lot of people did. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fashion because the Queen did it. But
that's true.
Yes, it is just bizarre how often female rulers are like, put down to their beauty routines. I just thought, how fun.
Oh my God.
Imagine in like 80 years' time, Margaret Thatcher's secrets to having such smooth skin.
Well, the thing is, I was going to then make a jab at Margaret Thatcher's appearance, but then I realised actually that's also ingrained sexism, because why do we care what?
Yeah, why jab at her appearance
like?
when she did so many other bad things?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually, we're going slightly off topic here, but I always found that as well with people like Theresa May. People would ridicule her for being a pushover and wearing weird jackets and walking funny and doing an odd little dance and, oh, doesn't she look tired? When in fact, we should lay at her door the accusations and the accountability that actually she's responsible for. My point is, whether a ruler made a lot of fantastic achievements or was a complete arse, what their appearance has anything to do with it is a little bit beyond me.
It's fun to know that Cleopatra may have bathed in milk, because I do enjoy the little parts of history, like what medieval people's socks were made of. I love the small things that's like, hey, I wear socks too, and so did they. How fun. Or like cave paintings and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, I like to paint, but... So it is fun to know.
Agreed.
But I also take the point that it shouldn't be the only thing that people know about someone, because that's kind of weird.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, I remember I was really into ancient Egypt when I was a lot younger, because we just happened to have some books on it. And I really liked the idea of them doing funky eye makeup looks, and like, oh, isn't that interesting that they generally would shave their heads and then have a wig.
Do you know one thing? Yeah. A beauty thing that I have found so interesting, and I want someone to write a book on it so I can read it, because I'm not intelligent enough. Well, I probably am intelligent enough, but I just don't have the energy in my bones to do it. Is ear piercings through different cultures. Pretty much every culture and every status has had ear piercings for one purpose or another, whether it's to show how rich you are or whether it's a mark of slavery. Every single culture's had it. So fun and interesting. That's glorious, really wonderful. This is my request to any historians out there who've managed to listen this far. Please write me a book about ear piercings.
I think similar things could be said about tattoos, because in a lot of cultures, again, they tell a huge kind of life story. Sometimes they're achievements, sometimes it's a rank thing. Over here, I think it's been associated with sailors for a while, most recently, before it went into the mainstream. But before then, it was aristocratic as well, wasn't it? But then again, you would get things like fleur-de-lis tattoos for a thief in France.
Yeah, I think the thing about earrings that's so interesting to me, and like ear piercings, is because royalty forever have had ear piercings. And I don't know, I just find it so interesting that it's something so obvious that someone has, but also it's pretty primal to stab something through your ear and be like, I would decorate myself by stabbing my ear.
That's a very good point. Like, what if I embedded this precious stone in my flesh?
That nobility would be like, sounds great. Yeah. And also people, you know, sticking sharp rocks through their ears a million years ago were also like, sounds great, I'd love to do it. It's just really interesting.
And there's a lot about, I think, Berber culture in Morocco. I may be wrong about this because I'm going off the cuff. There's a lot about like earlobe stretching that I've come across, and that being, you know, the weighted earring and the hole in the lobe being an important sign of status or resilience or something like that. I agree. That would be so interesting.
That it's something that every culture pretty much has been like, oh, I'd love to stab something through this dangly bit on my ear. It sounds
such a weird thing to do. Yeah, that's so interesting.
Anyway, sorry for completely derailing your Cleopatra thing, but I'm sure she had a pierced ears.
I actually have no idea. The fact that I don't know if she had pierced ears possibly slightly goes against my narrative of like, why do we know everything about what she looked like, but nothing about what she did, but it still stands. So I started looking into where our traditional Western ideas of Cleopatra come from. And basically, I can draw it down to a little timeline. So from now, we have general Western ideas of Cleopatra, which mainly come from Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, the play, which mainly comes from Plutarch's accounts in Parallel Lives, which he wrote probably at some time towards the beginning of the 2nd century AD. Plutarch's accounts as was kind of the style of the time, are very flowery and long-winded and a little bit lascivious. You just get the idea he's slightly perving over Cleopatra.
Who's not?
Well, that's my point.
Yep.
And this is like 150 years after her death, so it's just a little bit weird.
She's a rotten old corpse by then.
Yum.
Or not, was she mummified?
I don't know. They never found her tomb.
Oh, fun.
I know.
Probably she was probably unwrapped in a Victorian mummy unwrapping party and no one knew who she was.
Actually, probably, yeah. God, the amount that the Victorians did that
Victorians
just messed
scoundrels.
up everything. But hey, they gave us some fun history too. Anyway, right, that's from Plutarch's accounts, and Plutarch's accounts largely come from Emperor Octavian and his smear campaign against Cleopatra, both when she was alive and posthumously, because he is the guy that she essentially died in the war against. So basically, all of our ideas indirectly of Cleopatra come largely from Emperor Octavian, who painted her as like Mrs. Steal Your Man. He was like, guys, she's gonna come to your house, she's gonna steal your husband, and then she's gonna take your husband, get him to attack your house so she can live in your house, is basically...
Why would she want to? She's got a palace.
Well, you'll understand why he was saying those things, I imagine, when I go through the actual biography of Cleopatra, which I may well cut quite early on.
I can't wait till we get there.
Okay, well, let's not be salty because I've researched this.
You know, even if I'm saying nasty things, I do, of course, you bring me such joy and I am enjoying it. I am just joking for the means of the podcast to create some tension in the room. Some really uncomfortable energy for the podcast.
The producers of Love Island being like, can you do that interaction again? But
saltier.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm loving this new knowledge I'm getting. I haven't made any notes yet, though.
No, that's all right. Admittedly, I've started with like the attitudes to it rather than the material. Maybe I should have gone the other way around, but I didn't.
Let me know when I can tell you my research.
All right, tell me now.
Okay, I shall. She didn't have a beard.
Yeah.
She may have had her ears pierced, but nobody is sure.
All right.
Because it was the fashion at the time that some people would.
I would imagine.
And in terms of being mummified, it says here, Roman historian Dio Cassius reported that Cleopatra's body was embalmed. Spoilers, as Antony's had been. And Plutarch noted that on the orders of Octavian, the last queen of Egypt was buried beside her defeated Roman consort. More spoilers there.
Yeah.
But
well, no, I mean, if you don't know, like, it's happened.
If you don't know, they're dead. It's a spoiler. Sorry,
they did,
but they're dead.
Sadly, they have passed away. My point in all this is that our current Western conceptions of Cleopatra indirectly come from a misogynistic concept of the femme fatale, this dangerous kind of temptress. And even though that's become somewhat admired, that's kind of where it comes from. I went on a massive side note here for like 3 pages where I just talk about how I always have mixed feelings about, you know, that like reclaimed power sexual woman thing, which I think Cleopatra kind of epitomizes. What I mean by that is like the idolization of women reclaiming their sexuality is powerful, which is a good thing, and it's about like reversing the objectifying male gaze and being able to control it and define the objectification by having agency in it and being like, yeah, look at me, I am sexy, also I'm powerful, cool, that's nothing but good. But I for some reason I always feel somewhat uncomfortable with sometimes the way that it's portrayed
by men.
Yeah, I think partly
is it that men are like, oh, I like that, and it's like, you're not meant to like it.
Yeah, I think
it's not for you.
Right, it's partly because that movement, just by the nature of our very commercialized world, has ended up feeding back into whatever its intent has ended up kind of feeding somewhat back into the objectification of women and making them commerce. But equally, just like in my own life, I always kind of go, when like there've been situations when people have been getting ready for a party and I've also been going to the party and I've been wearing like a flannel shirt and jeans because that's what I fancy wearing, and some of my friends have got dressed up because that's what they fancy doing. All of those things totally valid, but I always feel weird when then people will see each other and like if someone is wearing, you know, a bold red lip or a short skirt or something, they'll be like, yes, we stan a powerful queen, which is fine. But I just get confused because
you're also a powerful queen in your flannel shirt and jeans.
Right, partly that. I'm like, excuse you, why am I not a powerful queen? And also,
where's my crown?
Exactly. And a lot of the time it'll be like, if it's a party, I'll be like, I mean, everyone's dressing up. Like, what? I thought I was being quite cool for not dressing up, but that's fine. And that, I'm aware, is personal insecurity and pitting myself against other women, which is not helpful.
I do think, though, with good old Cleo, Mrs. Patra.
Yeah.
With Miss Patra, it's different, though, isn't it? You can't, I feel like often you can't really compare the ancient world and modern misogyny,
No.
etc., to the ancient world and a queen. I'm not sure. I mean, though it's tempting, I'm not sure Cleopatra would love too much for everyone to be like, yes, queen.
Yeah, I don't know. My connection, I think, is to do with the concept of her being powerful still being intrinsically linked to her sexuality. And I think for me, applying it again to the modern day, like I would rather have how I look be incidental. And so if I rock up in a flannel shirt and jeans, it's like, hey, Martha's here. And if I rock up in a little black dress and a red lip, it's like, oh, Martha's here. And then what I say and do will be what people determine whether or not I'm quote unquote powerful. I don't know where this comes from. I don't know if it's a feminist issue. I don't know if it's a lookism issue. I don't know if it's a personal insecurity issue. But I just get, I don't know, confused by it. And I think it feels a bit patronizing as well. Like when someone, often a woman will come on TV and will be wearing very sort of sexy stuff and being quite sexual and expressing that side of themselves. And the people in the room will automatically be like, oh, iconic. And for me, I think that's quite condescending because I don't know yet if she's iconic. I know she's wearing a nice outfit. Like she, like everyone else, for me, needs to do something iconic to be regarded as iconic. And I feel like it's a bit condescending to be like, oh, don't worry, women, you can be powerful too. The way you need to do it is to wear this really skin tight dress and say something mildly inflammatory. And it's like, why is that the bar for me? And then the bar for the guy next to me is like, make a well-researched speech on gentrification. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I was thinking just when you said that last part about our Lord and Saviour Greta Thunberg, because she just comes into a space in a t-shirt and jeans and is like, please ignore what I'm wearing because I have important things to say.
Yes,
love her.
I really like that.
And then the other thing I was thinking about when you were saying about, say, like going out to a party with your peers and you're wearing shirt and jeans and your friend's wearing like a tight dress and a lot of makeup and stuff. I don't know I don't know the people that were dressed in that way, but my thought of complimenting them rather than you is that they might have been quite far outside of their comfort zone.
Yes, I do take that.
And I do
think
sometimes when someone's outside of their comfort zone and you can tell, it's nice to be like, you look great, oh my gosh, you look amazing, because it's nice to because obviously you're wearing clothes you're comfortable in, which is also lovely and great, and I think people should just wear what they're comfortable in, but when they like pushing the boundaries for themselves and being brave with what they're wearing, I do think that might be a reason. I
agree, and I think that's fair. I don't know where the comments of sort of extreme praise for people dressing up come from. It might well come from a place of, hey, I know that this person feels a little bit insecure in this, so I'm being like, you look powerful as hell. Like, that's really nice. But yeah, I don't know, it feels like a blanket thing for me.
I've got a friend who every day her general outfits are like a very tight fitting dress or a short skirt. And so no one ever says, yes, queen, you look amazing.
I see what you mean.
Because, and I wouldn't think to, because that's just normal for her. Whereas I've got other friends that do just wear t-shirt and jeans. And if they were to dress like that, then I would say, you look amazing, because I can tell that they are outside of their comfort zone.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point.
Not just that, though. They also look good.
Yeah.
And your brain...
No, I think that's a good point.
When you see different things, different things, you say, wow, that looks great. And when you see not different things, you're like, that's normal.
Well, that's the same as it was the other day. So like, why comment? Yeah, that's totally fair. Yeah. And I think also there might well be stuff there of me being like, I wish I could feel comfortable doing this and be praised. So it might well be coming from a personal place as well. I don't really know, but I just thought it was an interesting thing to go into since we're talking about this sort of thing. My summary point is just, I guess, if it is more of like a socio-political thing, it's about taking pride in something that's historically been used to oppress. So in this case, like female sexuality and the kind of duality between objectification and agency and how you look. You need to take pride in it before it can be incidental. And the issue here is the oppression that caused the pride to be necessary, not the pride. So I guess the thing, even if it makes me uncomfortable, it's needed and good. But anyhow, that's my slightly complex take on the femme fatale thing.
Just my personal summary on that as well is, with that, often it does become re-corrupted by the male gaze.
Yeah, that's
like,
the thing.
For example,
social movements are still within the biased world in which we live, so they
yes,
can get coloured
for
back.
example, you know, there's like an example I have is when women do photo shoots in their underwear or nude, who like they're feminists, and then everyone's like, I thought she was supposed to be a feminist, why is she doing this? And then they get all comments from people that fancy them that are like, oh wow, taking
I
this
like your bum
to bed with me tonight. Like, and then it's ruined because well, I don't know if it's ruined,
but I guess
but
that's
it
the
kind
thing
of
as well, like maybe the point is being like, I don't care if that happens, that's not why I'm doing it. But then at the same time, if that's what it's primarily being consumed for, I don't know.
It does put a dampener. I think it rains on the parade slightly though when everyone freaks out about it. But you know,
I would feel very frustrated if someone took something that I did to be personally empowering and used it to further oppress me in precisely the way that I was trying to break out of.
That would be frustrating, I think.
Right, we're on to some actual facts about Cleopatra now. So, Cleopatra is born in 69 BC, or possibly 70 BC, probably 69 BC, in Alexandria, Egypt. Her full name, which is Cleopatra the Seventh Tea Philopator, means Cleopatra the father-loving goddess, which is
more
a bit
like
weird.
brother-loving.
Yeah, I have noted that it's perhaps fitting given the incestuous traditions of the ruling family of the time. Her parents were Ptolemy the 12th and Cleopatra the 5th, which when I wrote this down, who was Cleopatra the 6th then? Because she's Cleopatra the 7th and her mom was Cleopatra the 5th. So
her cousin?
Maybe. But then unless it were a Cleopatra in the direct ruling line, why bother giving them a number?
Maybe her mother had a daughter, Cleopatra the 6th, and then she died, and then she was like, well, I liked the name, and then gives
I like the name. It is my name. Yeah, actually, that's probable.
Yeah, I forgot it was her name as well.
Yeah, they're not necessarily the most inventive with names.
Better than John the 7th. Like, okay, John.
Okay, true. But right, so her dad is Ptolemy the 12th. Her brothers are Ptolemy the 13th and Ptolemy the 14th. To be fair, I think they did have identifying names, but they were known historically just as Ptolemy. Her younger sister was called Arsinoe because they got bored of Cleopatra, I guess. I know. Now, the Ptolemaic dynasty were originally from Macedonia in Greece, but they'd ruled Egypt since, as we've recalled earlier, about 305 BC, following the death of Alexander the Great. They likely also had African blood, which we'll get onto later. Now, when I read that as like did they have African blood? I was like, they were Egyptian. Like, what are you talking about? Of course they had African blood. I think what they're getting at is like sub-Saharan African blood, i.e. black African blood, which slightly scuppers the ideas of a few racist historians, but we'll get onto it.
People are so weird. They're from Egypt. Calm down. Stop wanting
I know.
to be white the whole time.
I know. But anyway, 51 BC, Ptolemy the 12th dies, and so Cleopatra, who's 18... Ha! Bastard!
I'm glad!
I knew it! Cleopatra, who was 18 at the time, became the ruler of Egypt alongside her oldest brother, who was about 10 at the time. They probably got married, but to be fair, there's not actually evidence of this, but given tradition, like they almost certainly did.
Oh, okay.
Given that she was about 8 years older than him at the time, she kind of took on a leading role. However, cut to 50 BC, Cleopatra's brother decides actually he's going to rally some political support and drive her out of power, and so she's forced to flee to Syria.
Little brothers are so annoying. I don't have one, but that is a classic
they're
little
always
brother
the
move.
ones, aren't they? Yeah. Now, the cause of this, as I have gathered it, seems to be that basically the siblings were taking different approaches to the encroaching threat of Roman invasion. The Roman Empire was well on the up and up again. The Egyptian dynasty was doing great, but I guess they kind of stagnated in a way in terms of innovation, and Rome was the force to be reckoned with. And so Cleopatra wanted to negotiate with them, to be friends with them, and not get on their wrong side, which to me seems very sensible. Ptolemy, being, an 11-year-old boy, not to stereotype, wanted to fight them. And so he managed to exile Cleo to Syria. However, 48 BC, Cleopatra, having raised an army, returns to Egypt to reclaim the throne from her brother. Meanwhile, Julius Caesar is also in Egypt. I don't know exactly why, but he was kind of there to squabble with Pompey, who was another chief general. When Pompey was killed, Julius Caesar was just kind of hanging out around Egypt. In fact, I've also heard Ephesus. He was hanging out, in the ancient world somewhere. And Cleo
with the crocodiles,
sipping
on a coconut,
places. And so Cleopatra recruits her to her cause. Now, this tends to be portrayed, particularly in the kind of documentaries where they do dramatic reenactments, as Cleopatra like smuggling herself to Caesar in a chest, and then she'll rise up behind a curtain and be like, "Mighty Caesar, I beg for your aid. I am a queen, and yet I kneel at your feet." And then they sleep together. I'd like to emphasize once more that we have no idea if this is how it happened, because we weren't sodding there. And this is from Plutarch's writings later on, 150 odd years after her death, being a horny bugger. Can we just keep remembering this? I would also like to point out at this point, if an Egyptian queen flees to you and is like, "Yo, please help me," and seduces you, you don't have to help. Julius Caesar, he's very aware that he could just sleep with her and keep her as a slave. He could very easily do that. But something about what Cleopatra does...
You are a man of honor.
Exactly. But Cleopatra manages to get Caesar, who has no reason to stay in Egypt at this point, really, to rally all of his forces behind her as the disadvantaged party to oust her brother from power. To me, I think that suggests that they had a lot of very well thought through diplomatic conversations and negotiated power, rather than she slept with him once and then he was like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna win back your country for you." That's just my take, but I'd like to put it out there. Right, 47 BC, Ptolemy the 13th drowns in the Nile while fleeing Caesar's troops, and Cleopatra regains the throne. At this point, I was going to say it's unclear. It's probably quite clear, but I have not looked up enough to be clear to me precisely where Egypt stood in terms of like ruling itself. But at this point, whether it's because it was mainly regained by Roman troops or whether it was to do with Pompey doing stuff earlier or unrelated, Egypt is kind of slightly not entirely ruling itself. It's a little bit Rome-ish. But anyway, she's allowed to be queen of it alongside now her younger brother, Ptolemy the 14th, who's now about 12. They definitely do marry. And Cleopatra promptly has a son called Ptolemy the 15th.
That's nasty. That's nasty.
Now, Ptolemy the 15th was called Ptolemy the 15th Caesar, and he was nicknamed Caesarion, which means Little Caesar. So the general consensus is that he was probably Caesar's son, not her 12-year-old brother's son. I like to believe that because incest is not something I enjoy to think on, but that is speculation. Cut to 44 BC. Cleo and her son Caesarion pay a state visit to Rome, and unfortunately, when they're there, Caesar is murdered. So they're like, "Oh, whoops."
Awkward.
They return to Alexandria, where Ptolemy the 14th, so her husband's brother, also swiftly dies, so Cleo can now rule with her son. Again, did she kill him? Probably. There's not really any proof of it, though, so I'm just going to say insignificant. He died. 42 to 41 BC. Julius Caesar's heir is Octavian. He's his great-nephew, and Julius Caesar didn't have any legitimate children. But he's young, he's quite sickly, and so Mark Antony, who I believe was in charge of the eastern provinces of Rome at the time, steps in and claims authority over the Roman Empire, basically. I love how people used to do that back in the day. They'd just be like, "Oh, there's not a clear person to do it." So just the first person to be like, I'll be the king of everything, just does it. So that's what Mark Antony did. And he requests to see Cleopatra because he wants to question her about her role in the aftermath of Julius Caesar's assassination, because, you know, she came to Rome and then he died and then she fled. So, and
yeah,
so
she came to Rome, he died, and then she went back to Egypt and her husband died. I'd be suspicious too. Fair enough, Mark.
So would I think, top thinking, Mark. So she rocks up in Tarsus, modern day Turkey, looking fly, apparently, and he's smitten with her and returns with her to Alexandria, where he recognises her as an independent monarch and lives there as her paramour. Right, again.
Ooh!
I know. I would like to emphasise, records are all like, she sailed up the Nile, her hair was loose upon her shoulders, and she was adorned with emeralds. She had styled herself after the goddess Isis, and as she swept up the Nile, how could Mark Antony resist this vision of beauty? Like, she came up the Nile, and then they had a chat, and then he went to Egypt, is what we know happened. So let's just put a pin in your weird, horny fantasies, Plutarch.
Because... Well, can I just ask?
Yeah, go on.
Was it Plutarch?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, because my question was whether Rome was happy or not with Mark Antony doing that. Because in the records of Boudica, they say, wow, she's so strong, what a fierce warrior, amazing leader, all of this, because they're saying, hey, yes, we lost, but
she was so cool. That's a really good point.
She was strong, and when we beat her, it's really good that we beat someone who was so strong. And so being like, but it's like, yeah, Mark messed up, but she was fit. You know?
That's a good point. I don't know what Plutarch would have been pro, but what happened subsequent to this is basically that Rome turns against Mark Antony because he's over in Egypt, and Octavian's like, hey, they want to give Rome to the Egyptians, and everyone was like, so I would imagine they're anti Cleo and Mark Antony, particularly as at the point of Plutarch's writing, Egypt was still a Roman province, I think. So probably anti.
Yeah, but maybe they're saying they're anti him running off with her, but they're like, but you can see why, because she was pretty.
Again, I think it's one of those things of, now that she's not a threat anymore, it's just like, an exotic woman. Yum, 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 yum. Mr. Plutarch Milaike kind of situation. Anyway, again, if she was looking great and Isis-esque as she came up the Nile and maybe was being sexy towards Mark Antony, again, cool. He might even be inclined to be more politically lenient towards her. But finding her sexy, I would argue, is not why he would, as the leading Roman power, move himself to live with her and recognise her as an independent monarch when she is effectively his territory, as it were.
Yes,
I would suggest there's more than looks.
Boys do be silly.
Yeah, but I think this is also quite patronising to Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Like, they had an empire to run. I would like to have enough respect for them to believe that they're not ruled by their nether regions so much that they're...
No, I don't know, because there are certain people during lockdown who have been telling everyone, hey, stay at home, and then they've been running around with their mistresses, allegedly. So maybe maybe you would think that, but men in political power are often ruled by things other than good decisions.
Yes, but this situation, the decision that he's made to move to Egypt and recognise Cleopatra as her own monarch is political. It's not like an incidental personal decision that might reflect badly on his politics. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I understand your stances for feminism. I love the stance, but I'm just, considering the fact that
Mark
people
Antony
do make silly decisions
stupid
because they really fancy someone.
Yeah, and to be fair,
people do make very silly choices.
Yeah, and on that note, it's worth pointing out that if Cleopatra did achieve a lot of what she achieved through seduction, then, props to her for using what power she had. But I like to think that her power was more diplomatic than purely looks-based. We don't know. Either way, she succeeded in getting Mark Antony to recognise her as her own monarch and coming to Egypt with her. Oh, also that year, I've put in brackets, also at some point she maybe has her sister murdered. So Arsinoe, way back in the Julius Caesar bombarding of Alexandria when Ptolemy XIII was still technically in power, she held this really cool standoff at the lighthouse of Alexandria, I think it was. And Caesar barely escaped with his life, and they found his cloak and hoisted it above the battlements, and it was all badass. But then Cleo won, and Arsinoe was briefly in Roman hands, and they paraded her around. But then the crowd, traditionally, what would happen would be like rebels who were captured from a battle would be paraded around in a big arena with Julius Caesar presiding over it, and then they would be ritually strangled. But the Roman crowd were kind of like, this is a female child that is in a cage, don't strangle her, that's mean and nasty. And
did they actually say that?
Well, not in so many words, but yeah, the crowds were not cool with
that's
us in a way
interesting.
being strangled.
Was it mainly a Roman audience or mainly an Egyptian audience?
Roman. This was back in Italy, I think, or possibly Ephesus.
Okay.
But either way, it was people who were like, yeah, Caesar, Roman Empire.
Okay,
but they were just like, but this
wondering.
is a child, basically. So that was cool.
Okay.
So then she was exiled to the Temple of Artemis in, I think, Ephesus. And the Temple of Artemis had its own, the Artemision had its own jurisdiction. So while she was there, she wasn't under anyone's anything.
Like, you know, I want to go to the place, the embassy, when people hide in the embassies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where it's like, it's neutral territory, or technically, like, this is British soil if it's the British embassy.
I'm never coming out of the embassy.
Yeah, that's so true, actually. It's such a weird concept. It's a lot like that, except if the embassy were like the embassy of God, I guess is a church. Which is kind of the point.
But
this is the temple.
People do say like, oh, don't kill in a church, but I'm sure
but
it
happens, done it, yeah. Which is kind of what happened here.
But it happens, done it.
Sorry, not trying to laugh over people being murdered in a church. That's a really bad thing to happen, as is murder
we're not
anywhere.
Laughing directly at them. We're laughing at you saying it happens, doesn't it?
Okay, right. So Arsinoe, basically, probably by Mark Antony's soldiers, probably on Cleopatra's orders, was dragged out of the temple and killed. Again, she probably did do it, and that is a crappy thing to do to your sister, but no more crappy than other stuff that other people have done. So, 40 BC. Cleopatra gives birth to twins, Alexandra Helios and Cleopatra Selene. Sun and the moon.
Twins. That's gonna suck. No, I just think
she's fine.
Suck.
She's got staff.
No, she's not fine because she had to give birth to twins in the ancient world. True. Don't care how rich you are, giving birth to twins in the ancient world is not going to be fun.
True, but she made it. The twins made it. Woohoo! Mark Antony at this point has headed back to Italy for a bit to marry Octavian's sister as a part of a settlement for Roman control. Side note, he was actually married before the whole Cleo thing as well. And his wife was, I think she was called Fulvia, maybe? She was off advocating for him in Italy, but then he kind of forgot about her, went off with Cleo, then she died, so then he's marrying someone else. However, 3 years later, 37 BC, he decides to give up on the political marriage. He's not going to see eye to eye with Octavian, so he comes back to Cleopatra and he seeks financial assistance to his military campaign against the Parthian Empire, which is basically the ancient Iranian superpower at the time. Cleopatra's like, yeah, I'll give you money if you give me most of Egypt's Eastern Empire back. Just give me the empire back. He's like, okay. I think that's so cool because she has managed to get him to come to her and recognize her authority and put him in a position where he needs to come to her for aid without her giving anything back, so that now when he does come to her for aid, she can be like, yeah, but give me all this back that you had before. I just think that's really clever. It's very cool. So 34 BC, the Parthian campaign fails, but Cleopatra and Antony just kind of pretend that it hasn't, so they're having a grand old time. They keep going on about ruling the world. And they have this party. I can't remember what it was called. It was called like Donations for Alexandria or something. I don't know why I didn't write it down, but there we are. And they sit on like silver thrones, and Mark Antony, remember Ptolemy the 15th, the son that Cleopatra had? Mark Antony is like, yeah, so Ptolemy the 15th is actually Julius Caesar's son, which puts him above Octavian in the running for emperor. So haha, Octavian, wins going our way. So Octavian's like, he starts getting tetchy. So he starts stirring up propaganda against Cleopatra and Antony. He says Antony wants to give Rome to Cleopatra and Egypt. He wants to transfer the capital of the Roman Empire from Rome to Alexandria. He basically fearmongers in a similar way to how people fearmonger nowadays about foreigners. He's like, do you want your capital to be in a foreign country? Do you want our goods to be going to a foreign lady? Ugh. And Rome's
Do
like,
you want
oh my God.
Cleopatra to be giving birth to her twins in the NHS? Yes, I do. Get that woman some medication.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So he's saying all these things. And then in 31 BC, the Roman Senate declares war against Cleopatra. Cleopatra and Antony combine their forces to fight the naval battle of Actium off Greece's western coast. But they lose crushingly. They're both at the battle, but they both manage to flee back to Egypt and evade capture. However, 30 BC, they're still fighting the war. It's a little bit of a lost cause at this point. Antony is in battle, and someone just Shakespeare's him and is like, yo, Mark, Cleopatra is totally dead. She's dead, man. She's taken her life. She's dead. So Mark Antony, being a drama queen, to be fair, actually, purely based on how melodramatic he is here, I could be willing to believe your thesis that maybe he was just extra enough to go and live with Cleopatra after meeting her once. He falls on his sword, but he's like, okay, guys, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to fall on my sword, and then you guys have to really quickly carry me to Cleopatra's retreat, and then I'll moan and groan outside and be like, oh, I'm dying for you, and that'll be fun.
Oh, so Cleopatra, in his mind, she's dying or is dead?
Yeah, he thinks she's dead.
Oh, right. Okay, because I was going to say, if he thinks that she's dying and he thinks that she wants to be hearing him moaning and groaning in death,
me too,
while she's dying, it's like, can nothing be just about Cleopatra, please?
It's a good point. But yeah, he has himself carried to Cleopatra's retreat to die.
It's like when you're ill and someone's like, I'm more ill. And it's like, okay.
It's like, okay, we can both be ill. No, it's really annoying.
Okay, we can both be dying, Mark. It's fine.
Cleopatra is fine. But then someone's like, Cleo, I don't know how to tell you this, but Mark Antony, you might have heard the wailing outside. Mark Antony's just stabbed himself outside. Cleopatra at this point knows that she's beaten, and so she reportedly commits a dignified suicide by allowing herself to be bitten by an asp, which is a symbol of divine loyalty. It's totally Shakespeare, yeah.
The thief.
Accounts slightly vary. Some people say that it was 2 snakes sent to her in a basket while she was in prison by a mercy person, you know.
Yeah, I think that's the one I've heard.
Yeah, and it's something to do with the staff of Egypt being 2 snakes entwined on a staff, which confuses me because I thought that was the caduceus and the symbol of Hermes, but that's completely different. That's Greek. I don't know.
I thought that was doctors.
Yeah, exactly, the caduceus.
Oh, right, okay, cool. Big name for it.
Yeah,
I'll just call it the Doctor's Snaky
Dr.
Staff.
Snaky Staff.
I wondered why everyone was looking at me all worried.
She kills herself, probably via snakebite of some kind, and is buried alongside Mark Antony as per both of their wishes. Egypt becomes a Roman province, and that's the end of that.
That's so sad.
So, yeah.
Very dramatic of Mark to do that. And I hope that Cleopatra checked before she got the snakes involved that he was dead, because otherwise that's chaos.
The whole thing again. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to be fair, both of them at the time, I think, knew that they were fighting like a properly lost war. And so suicide was one of their options, alongside probably being paraded around, similar to the way that Arsinoe would have been paraded around a Roman arena and then ritually executed, which probably wouldn't have been fun
either. I have a question.
Yeah.
That you may or may not know. I feel like I know the answer to it. I'm going to ask it anyway. This is still classified as ancient Egypt, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is wild, because I feel like this for Egypt should be called like midpoint Egypt, because ancient Egypt goes way back to like the Stone Age. And so it's like ancient Egypt for 1,000,000 years.
Yeah, I don't know how exactly they quantify what is and isn't ancient.
I guess they just like put dates classical on it.
Yeah, I guess.
So my question is, obviously, over the years, their religion will have evolved. But by this point, is Cleopatra still on the whole, mummify me, and I will every night fight through hell to make the sun rise in the morning? Or is she like, I have a different belief?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Based on the fact that she politically styled herself somewhat after Isis, the goddess, there was clearly some, old-timey Egyptian god rhetoric going on. But I don't know if she believed in traditional afterlife myths. If you know, do let us know, because that's fascinating. There's so much
Put
cool
it on
stuff
a
about ancient
postcard and send it to 1234 Internet Street.
Egypt.
I think that's actually in South Korea, fun fact. Or
Really?
China, somewhere.
Internet Street. Fun. Right, I still have several pages of
Oh my
funky
god,
stuff.
what have you got to say?
Well,
She's dead. What's more to say?
I know, so that was a rundown of her life. But now I want to go back to the beauty thing, but this is a more academic, it's not me going, so what do you think? Now that we've gone through her achievements and everything, I just want to, chat about what she probably looked like and why it's relevant. So, as I've mentioned, later accounts kind of won't shut up about her being very sexy. Modern documentaries do it too. It's really annoying. Again, this documentary I saw about with Cleopatra being a killer, they kept doing these little non-verbal shots and it'd be like, Cleopatra is exiled to Syria. And the image they showed for that was Cleopatra like washing off her makeup and taking off her bangle. And then they were like, meanwhile, Cleopatra was seducing Julius Caesar, and she sits up and there's a gauze and she's walking in that way that nobody walks ever, but it's very fluid, Anyway, it's very much focused on. I think it's not helped by the fact that beauty in this context is generally translated into kind of Western ideals. So she'll often be described as having fairer skin, having delicate features, really giant eyes and dark hair. So, we'll adopt the features that we accept as beautiful in Western society that are more prominent within other ethnic groups, like larger eyes and dark hair, but not the things like darker skin and big foreheads or like broader noses or anything like that. So portrayals of Cleopatra and her sexiness reflect this.
Yeah, like that woman with purple eyes.
Elizabeth Taylor.
Mm.
Yeah, very, very famously
Very
portrayed her. Lots of Caucasian actors portraying Cleopatra in films that also portray her as just this femme fatale who does nothing but seduce. It's very frustrating on many levels. But the thing is, if we look at contemporary depictions of her, it's quite different to the popular narrative. So based on contemporary depictions on things like coins and also on skull analysis of her sister Arsinoe, whose skeleton was found and identified in 2009. The most certain thing seems to be that she'd have had a really distinctive nose, probably very long, very straight, kind of downwards rather than outwards. She probably also had big eyes, a very kind of wide mouth. She would have been mixed race. 2009 evidence suggests that her mother was, surprise, surprise, of African origin. Again, like she lived in Egypt. I don't know what people were expecting.
Yeah, I'm not shocked.
Yeah. And Sally Ann Ashton in 2008 did a 3D recreation which emphasises this with cornrowed hair. I don't know whether that's just a kind of stylized depiction or if it's, hey, we think that Cleopatra probably had her hair in cornrows. I have heard elsewhere that she quite possibly had Afro texture hair, so that makes a lot of sense.
Well, also, if she's wearing wigs, then
either shave your head or cornrows would make a whole lot of sense to get your hair out the way.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. Now, something I want to make clear here, though, is that because some historians are like, well, based on the coins and the analysis, she wasn't beautiful. I would like to critique that critique as kind of racist because I think the features that people are suggesting are not beautiful here are things like a prominent nose, and the people don't explicitly say things like the skin tone, but it's kind of implicated. And I think basically the thing is, the way that Cleopatra probably looked is probably very different from the westernized narrative of beauty that we have ascribed to her. But it's just important to note that.
Well, also, if contemporary people are saying she's beautiful, and the general feeling is, yes, she was very beautiful, then she probably was.
Yeah, exactly. And whatever she looked like was probably considered beautiful at the time.
Yes, exactly. The kind of looks that, I don't know, someone in Sweden during the Neolithic period, the kind of person everyone thought was beautiful then is probably very different than now.
Yeah,
the same as all over the world at very different times.
Exactly. 17th century England, everyone thought that massive foreheads were really in because that's just the way that people were thinking, partly because of things like lead poisoning and head shaving and eyebrow loss. But yeah, the point is, standards of beauty change according to situation and location and time
and
period.
It's not even just like, oh well, it was so long ago. Like, look at the standard of beauty in like the 90s or the 70s, like it doesn't even have to be that long. It's my dog's just sniffed into my microphone. It doesn't have to be thousands of years. It can be 50 years, everything can be different or not, depending on
absolutely, yeah.
the tea.
So basically my point here is that Cleopatra probably didn't look like the quote-unquote beautiful portraits that we in modern Western society paint of her, and for some reason we've decided that's the only thing that makes sense as being described as beautiful. But at the same time, that doesn't mean she wasn't beautiful and that the features that she probably had weren't or aren't beautiful. I think there's definitely some racial implications going on there of what's beautiful, and it's important to acknowledge that within our Western beauty standards anyway.
Why do people have to suck so much?
I know. So basically it's racist and sexist.
Let people be called pretty, even if you don't think they are. Let them be beautiful.
Exactly. So in reality, her beauty would probably have been quite different from classical Roman ideals, which to me further implies that she would have just been, as a person, very persuasive and seductive in how alluring she would have been, and power and stuff like that, more than objective looks, which would have had different standards in Egypt versus Greece and Rome, etc., etc. Here's something interesting. There's another angle on Cleopatra, which we in our UK teachings are probably less familiar with. So it turns out medieval Arabic writings, probably coming from the Ottoman conquest of Egypt in the 16th century, really dig Cleopatra as a scholar and politician, and they really don't mention her looks or her relationships pretty much at all, like in a notable way. So they gave her the title of the virtuous scholar, and they attribute a lot of scientific knowledge to her. They cite scientific books penned by her as the definitive works in their field. I didn't know that she'd written any books. I don't know any Western accounts that say that she had written books. You look at the Arabic accounts.
I didn't know that.
They reference them in their contemporary understanding of things like medicine. So she's referred to as a chemist, as a scholar. They really admire her administration abilities. She made great strides in alchemy and medicine and maths. An example of this, historian al-Masudi, he was writing at D 956. This is the Arabic or Islamic calendar, which I'm not familiar with. I'm not entirely sure how it translates into the Gregorian calendar, but I think it was around the 17th century. He calls her a sage, a philosopher who elevated the ranks of scholars. He says she wrote books on medicine, charms, and cosmetics. In general, Arabic scholars seem to have a great respect for ancient Egypt as a whole as well. They credit the early warning systems of the Lighthouse of Alexandria, which had a burning mirror to warn ships of, well, that there were rocks there, obviously, in the way that a lighthouse does. They cite an automatic public clock that sounded each hour. There were water clocks, water wheels, etc. They talk about how leading these developments were in their fields, which they were. And I've just put more on this in Egyptology, the Missing Millennium, Ancient Egypt in Medieval Arabic Writing by Dr. Okasha El Daly, which I'd be really interested to read. I haven't read it, but it just sounds to me like that's a really interesting perspective on Arabic scholarship, and B, a really interesting perspective on Cleopatra and Egypt as a whole. So to sum up, firstly,
summary!
Cleopatra is clearly much more than a pretty face, and B, we need to be critical about where our knowledge comes from, i.e., is it racist and sexist? Probably. So I think, yeah, it's important that we look critically at our sources and look further afield to see if there are alternative ideas that are less prejudiced to give us a fuller picture. And that is Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt.
Glorious. Thank you for listening to the Other Marthas podcast, the show where a drama student and a film graduate talk about things we have no business knowing about. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do subscribe or follow our podcast on all the various sites, and also give us a little like, a little review, whatever you want to do. Do it. Bye.